1999 Honda Valkyrie Interstate. Been sitting for a long time. Let's see if we can resurrect her and get her back out on the road. Alright, so as I said, this is a 99 Valkyrie Interstate. The story behind it is a little convoluted, mainly because I don't remember all the details. But the tag shows that it was last registered in 2014. And the gentleman who owns this, the owner, said that basically life got in the way and he wasn't able to ride it. And I guess it sat for a while and needed carb work. And he's done the carb work, but several years ago. And then he put the carbs back in and wasn't able to do anything else because life got in the way even further or more, furthermore. So that's where I come in. He found my other Valkyrie videos on YouTube. This gentleman is from my area, retired fire paramedic like I am. So definitely want to do him good on this one, like I would on any customer, of course. But, you know, we take care of our own in the fire service. But I'll take care of you too, don't worry. Yeah. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to go over it real quick. And then we're going to get to fixing. And there's a lot to fix. Let me show you. She's pretty grimy, as you can see. Yucko. 7/14 is our last registration date, as I said. I've been sitting on a trailer for a couple of years. The trailer is out there. I have the trailer here. I should have filmed some of that, getting it off the trailer, but it was very difficult and time-consuming, so I didn't. And that was a nightmare. Not a nightmare, but it was a challenge. It involved wood screws, a winch, a battery pack, and some cussing. But we got her off the trailer and up onto the lift. Anyway, let's start with the carbs. Now, again, the owner said several years ago he got, I'm assuming he got the repair kit from Red Eye Technical, where I get my stuff from, because he mentioned them a couple times. And he said he went through these and rebuilt them, got them back in, and then never did anything further. Needs all the different vacuum lines hooked up and verified. He said he desmogged it himself, so it doesn't have that paravalve or any of the, I don't know, the piping coming off here. I don't even remember what these things look like when they're normal. So anyway, these are, this is kind of interesting. These are the carb drains, you know, for when you want to drain the carbs on the bottom of the float bowls? Yeah, the float bowls. He sat so long that the mud daubers are making nests inside of them. You can kind of see it down in there. And that leads me to a concern I have is the carb intake, or the inlet hose, I should say, that goes from one to bifurcates out to one side or another. There's your word for the day, bifurcation. This fuel line is stiffer than Peter North on a good night, so we're going to have to get rid of that fuel line. Probably this vent line, vacuum line between the T's is no good. So that probably means we're going to pull the air box, which is a real PITA on this one, and we may end up pulling the carbs too. I don't know yet. We may just try running it as it sits, but again, I don't want to do that with that fuel line in there that looks like it dates back to the last century, which of course it does date back to the last century. So I'm going to have to remedy that, and I can't really get at that with these carbs in place, or at least the air box in place. So I'm pretty sure at least the air box is going to have to go. This throttle is real stiff. Yesterday it wouldn't even move. I don't know if that's the throttle shafts, or you said shaft, or the cable, most likely cable. We may throw new cables on it eventually. Probably a good idea. But as far as the carbs go, that's as far as I know. And I'd really like to see if she'll fire off, you know, with the carbs in the condition they are right now. If it runs good, then we'll balance them and call it a day. But it needs oil. He said he thinks he drained the oil out of it. There's like hardly anything on the dipstick. You said dipstick. Well, there's a little bit on there. Maybe at the very tip. Just a tip and just for a second. So yeah, he brought over pretty much all the parts I need, because he's been assembling them with the intention of finishing it. And it's all taken apart because he wanted to do some mods to it. And we may get to that. The mods included putting new air shocks, or different shocks on, which are air shocks. On the bike, and also putting a air pump in the left saddlebag over there, which was his intention. So I don't know if we'll get to that, because what we also have to do is we got fork seals a leaking and they've been leaking for a while, and these are inverted, so they're going to be somewhat of a job, but I'm sure we can handle it with the kit that we have, or the tools we have for it. The brakes are pretty much scrap, not scrap, but you know, pretty bad, locked up for the most part. I had to loosen the calipers and give them the old Tommy hit, which is with my little yellow dead blow. You know, you loosen up the caliper bolts and give them a couple of Tommy hits, boom, boom, and they'll loosen up enough where you can actually roll the thing. And the rears, I'm sure, are no better, but we didn't have to do that on that part. Usually it's the fronts that bind us up the worst. I have some of the brake parts and some other stuff like master cylinder rebuilds. He replaced the clutch master cylinder. The whole assembly, because he said when he took it off he lost it, which was interesting. But this is all brand new Honda, so that must have cost something. And so I'm not worried about that. Never had fluid in it yet, not even hooked up. You know, the banjo's not hooked up or anything. Here's your line here, which is of course all rusted. So we may end up doing a clutch hose on it as well, and the clutch slave is way down inside there on the back of the motor, so yeah, that's not going to be fun. So we'll figure that out when the time comes. But like I said, she's pretty kind of messed up, but we'll get her going hopefully. There's no major mechanical issues, which I really doubt. What's the mileage on this thing? Oh, it's digital, so I can't tell you. Yeah, the battery's not here. The battery was dead. The owner took the battery, and he is bringing that back, a new one to me, and also the key. He didn't have the key with him. Somehow he forgot the key. So well, when I get the key and I get a battery, we'll at least turn it on and take a look at the mileage and see what that is. We need to pull the airbox cover off and see if there's any critters that built anything inside there. Hopefully there's not. And then just kind of go over it. But I'd really, like I said, I really like to try this in situ with fuel and fire it up, see if it fires at all. I just have a gut feeling that the carbs are going to end up coming out again. I just can't tell you why, but I think they're going to end up having to come out again. I just got a gut feeling, and that's only because it's just been sitting for so long. I don't care how long they were rebuilt, or if they were rebuilt at all. And he said there was no fuel applied to them. They could be gummed up, you know, just from the cleaning solvents or whatever was used. I don't know the procedures that were used. I don't know what he used on it, so it's very possible that these carbs will have to come out. And I'll shoot that if the time comes to do that. Because I know you like all that stuff, especially where I have to hold my tongue from cussing because these are such a pain in the royal keister to get out. Maybe not so much on this one, because again, all that mission control garbage is supposedly missing in there. I guess it is. But yeah, it's still a pain. So yeah, so what else? So what did I say? Forks, brakes, the engine, get it running. Replace what needs to be replaced outside of what he brought. I got oil, I got nuts and bolts, I've got some seals, gaskets, O-rings. So anyway, that's where we're at. So what we're going to do is come back when we got a bateria, we got a key, we'll check the mileage. By then I'll make a decision on whether I'm going to pull the airbox out at least. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to pull the airbox out, but pull the airbox and the carbs out. We'll see. So that's it. I have to go order a couple of parts. He didn't have the brake packing, the internals for the calipers, so I'm going to order those from Brake Crafters, of course, which is where I get everything from. BrakeCrafters.com, highly recommended. And then go spec some probably OEM seals out. I don't like putting aftermarket seals in you know, bikes for other people, customer bikes, whatever. Yeah, I do it on my own stuff, but it's sitting here, so if it starts to leak again, I can just fix it. This bike lives out of state, so we're going to do the best we can to prevent any comebacks, right? Okay, so speaking of comeback, we'll come back later. Got a new battery in. Let's go ahead and take a look at the mileage. Going to fire up the console for that, the display. Looks like it says 86,928. And it's got some mileage on her. You know, she ain't no spring chicken. Alright, so this is where we're at. I have the new fuel line put in. All I did was raise up the box a little bit. I raised the bar, and we were able to get in there, and then I can just put it back down and put the air filter back in. Nice and cleaned. It's a K&N power, and so we're going to put that back and get that top part here all set up and ready to try to test start it. But first, what I want to do is I pulled the spark plugs out, and I'll give you a recommendation on this, how I do it. This thing been sitting for a long time with the spark plugs in there. So normally what I'll do is I'll squirt a little bit of like PB Blaster just around the spark plug. You can't really do too much in this motor because there's those little drain holes down in there, but if they're plugged, you probably could, but just a little bit, and then start breaking these loose. And as soon as that PB Blaster starts to capillary itself down into the threads, they come out a lot easier, because the last thing I want to do is gall one of these spark plug holes. They all came out good. They don't look terrible. We're going to reuse them for now. And the reason why I did this is because the motor had been sitting for 2 years or more. I don't know how long. We're going to bar it over by hand, but first throw some fogging oil down the cylinders, just a little squirt, followed by air compressor, you know, the air nozzle, the air nozzle guy right here. And that'll kind of aerate it around the cylinder, and then we'll bar it around a little bit, do a little bit, bar it around, do a little bit, and on both sides, on both banks, just to re-lubricate cylinder walls a little bit. I don't know if this motor's stuck, you know. For all I know, it could be stuck, but I seriously doubt it. The owner said he thought he drained the oil out of it, because when we checked the oil, it wasn't on anything on the stick, but you know, the dipstick. But there was oil in it, so I drained the oil first, luckily, before putting any new oil in it, and then put a new filter on that he provided. And it's all topped off with 3.7 liters of 1030 motorcycle oil that he provided, which is synthetic. I don't really like synthetic too much, but we'll see what happens. And then, like I said, we'll bar it over, get the cylinders lubed up, make sure everything's free. And then at that point, I'm going to go ahead and put the top cover back on, you know, the air filter, and then crank it over for a bit without the spark plugs in it. To build some oil pressure and repopulate that fresh oil throughout the motor. You like that? Populate. And then at that point, we'll throw some fuel to it with the spark plugs back in and see if she fires off. So I kind of do this in a stepwise fashion, you know, one step to the next, rather than just, you know, throw some fuel in it and see if she lights off. Because again, you know, this thing been sitting for a long time. I kind of like to go slow with it, make sure the engine's nice and free. The rings aren't stuck to the cylinder walls. Certainly if they're not, they are a little bit on one or more cylinders. I don't want to hit it with the starter. I just kind of want to rock it a little bit by hand. How you do that on these flat sixes is right here. There's a cover plate. And underneath the cover plate here is a you know, big bolt. You can crank this thing over according to the service manual to turn it counterclockwise, which is part of the procedure for doing valve clearance check, which we'll probably end up doing later on down the line. But that's in the maintenance chapter of the service manual on the computer, so that's where you look that up in the Honda manuals at least. You say, what does the Honda manual say for maintenance, if you want to know how and in what direction to manually turn an engine over with, because it'll be in a valve clearance check area, you know, for maintenance. So anyway, that's what I'm going to get done, and when I fire the camera back up, we'll be ready to crank her over, just without the spark plug holes in. And then we'll put the spark plugs back in, hit it with some fuel, see if we have any, you know, gross leaks. Gross! And if it's not doing that, we're going to try to fire this off. Oh, by the way, I do have to lube some cables. I disconnected these yesterday because when I first turned the throttle, when it came in, this thing wouldn't even turn. I figured it might be the carbs that were binding. They don't really seem, which way does this go? They don't really seem, you know, they're not the smoothest rotational feel on the planet here, but I think they might be a little gummy, but not enough to warrant taking these apart. Besides, if we need to take these off, we're going to shotgun the whole thing anyway, but if we don't, then they should be fine. Anyway, let's do that, and when we come back, that's what you'll see. Alright, so I got it up to the point where I said I was going to get it up to the point before, you know, getting it up. That works. To crank this thing over without any spark plugs in it and generate some oil pressure. Watch the oil light up here if I can see the damn thing. And yeah, then we'll throw some plugs in it and try to fire it up with some fuel. The issue I had mainly was, took me so long, was the choke cable. The enricher cables here, like, really almost froze. Not the rack here where the plungers are so much, but cables themselves, and I lubricated both cables. There's essentially two cables here. There's a link. This is a linkage cable that goes from the left bank over to the right to activate these, and then a main cable coming from the control. That's all messed up. This really needs to be replaced. That control cable up there. I don't know if I have to. I don't think I got to pull the clutch in. I'm not sure. Well, nothing happens. Maybe I do. Stand by. I heard something clicking though, so I don't know. Yeah, see, look at that. Nothing. Well, that's not good. So now I got to diagnose a starter problem. I don't believe it's battery. I had this battery on charge, but let me meter it up to make sure, because it's a brand new battery. You never know. Battery's metering up at 12.9 volts, so that's not it. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing is a relay. The starter relay's clicking, so it should be energizing the solenoid to crank this thing over, but that should be right here. Right back here, a typical Honda setup. There may be a separate relay that energizes this, I don't know, but this essentially is a typical Honda starter solenoid dealio behind here, and almost always these connections are corroded, so I'm going to have to get into these. But there's your main starter wires right there. Where those bridge, we can actually bridge those with a wrench and see if they are little pliers or something, a screwdriver, and see if it just starts to crank. If so, then we know it's not downstream. But yeah, so let's listen again. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be coming from here. It doesn't seem to be coming right from here. Something else is going on here. Well, anyway, let's test that. Yeah, you know what that is? That's the headlight interlock relay. Turns your headlight off when you crank. We'll go ahead and test this out real quick and make sure it's going to crank. Yeah, so it's definitely not any part of the starter or anything like that. It's just for some reason not getting energized. Let me pull this connector off and see if it's corroded up, see what we need to do in there. All right, I got it. And here's the thing. I started metering around and going, wait a minute, let's think of the simple stuff first. This bike's been sitting around forever. So most likely we have a bad connection in a vulnerable location. What would be the most vulnerable location that would control or cause a no crank condition? It would be the kill switch. So I just held the starter button down with the ignition on and then rocked this back and forth a few times, and boom, it starts cranking. So simple stuff first. See, right now it won't do it again, but if we rock that, it'll start eventually. Here, let me try to do this in one hand. See? So what we have is a bad connection up here in the kill switch. So I'm going to try to get some WD-40 or something down in there to at least be temporary for us, to give us a more reliable crank. But that's the problem. We're not getting a good connection through the kill switch. So always the KISS principle when it comes to electrical on a thing that's been sitting for a while, you know? Still finicky, but it's going to work for us. Alright, oil light went off and came back on when I stopped cranking, so that's good enough for me. Spark plug-a-roonies, fuel, be right back. Okay, sparky pluggies are back in. I capped off any open intake ports. We'll address them later. I did charge the carbs with fuel just to see if they would leak. I do smell a little gas, so I shut the fuel off, and I'm going to try to fire it up on what's in the float bowls first. I don't know the status of these things. I hope they're not flooding the motor out or anything, but you know, the combustion chamber. So we'll kind of bump it over and see what it's doing. So here we go, contact. Seems to want to go. That sounds all right. Turn the fuel back on. Let's give her some enricher. Does not want to stay running that idle at all. It's almost like the idle is way off as far as the adjustment. Let me figure out where the hell that is and we'll turn it up. Oh, that'd be this guy right here, you know, like right by the main cam where the linkages go into. Doi. Let's try that. Whoa, what am I reaching up there for? I don't think it's running on all 6 either. Might be. Aha! There's your problem, lady. I think we are, yeah, we're leaking fuel. I think. Yep. And here's your problem, kids. Let me turn the fuel off. Should be able to see somewhat in there now if it'll focus. That's the fuel T on the right bank of carbs. Whatever these cylinders are numbered, I don't know. You see how it's wet? And that is because of not the fuel line. Trust me, that fuel line is freaking on there. That is the fuel T's leaking where they go into these 2 carbs. The fuel joint that goes between the 2 front carbs does not appear to be leaking yet. But the rear fuel T, so you have a T here and a joint there, joint man, are leaking. The other side's pretty much the same. You can see it right there. This is the left bank. And there's your fuel joint up there, which, you know, looks pretty good. But see, the problem is on these carbs, everything has got to be perfect. Otherwise, you got problems with them. Especially on a 6-cylinder, this flat 6, these Valkyrie carbs, they got to be exactly right. I'm kind of happy to see this, to be honest with you. Because number one, I have a kit in the shed for a Valkyrie, and it's complete with the float needles, everything. And number two, I'm going to know that it's done right. But unfortunately, that means we have to split the rack. So that's going to be a completely different video. I already have a video on that on my channel for splitting the rack on that other, you know, what is it called? The Valkyrie? No, the Vulcan. And so you can kind of refer to that. I'll try to remember the link to that in the description. But the bottom line is, these got to come out. We got to split the rack. You might as well just take it down to bits. It's really the best way to do it on these. Check everything. There's these little air valves on the side of these carbs. I don't know if I can get a shot of one. There's one right there, which is kind of, you see that screw and that little piece of black plastic with a hose going to it? That's an air check valve. The kit comes with O-rings and instructions how to test those. You're supposed to put a certain amount of vacuum to them to make sure that they hold on one way and then they pass air the other way under different circumstances. So you got to test those and make sure those are good. If you got to replace even one of those, it's hugely expensive. So we have new O-rings for the not the vacuum, but the fuel vents, the fuel T, the fuel connector, the joint up front, and everything else. So these are definitely going to have to come out. We also have these O-rings. He said he replaced them. We'll replace them again. And the kit comes with these caps that you put into the bores here, the yellow caps. They just drop inside to keep schmoo and crap from dropping down inside the engine. That would be bad. So we'll take advantage of those. But that'll be a completely different video. This was just to see if it would kick off, which it did. And, you know, we could run it a little bit like this, but, you know, why bother? It's a little low on coolant. I did check the coolant, so we're going to have to probably flush and refill that. It's got that Honda red coolant in it. So I think at that point, you know, we'll do that, but not right now. Yeah, there's a lot to do on this bike. So I was hesitant to say this would be a series, but it's going to end up being at least, I'd say at least 3. I know it's leaking, but I want to fire it off one more time. I just love the way these things sound. Sounds like it's got an exhaust leak. It does, I can feel it puffing out the little water drain here. I don't know. Yeah, not bad. She was a runner, that's for sure, but it runs good. Do you think it runs good now, rather? Wait till I get done with these carbs, it'll run even better. This thing will start up with just a touch of that button, and it'll go right into an idle. Because I don't know what these fuel screws are set, but I will know when we get done with them. Alright, so there you have it, 99 Valkyrie Interstate. She's definitely a runner. She'll be a keeper here in a bit. I know probably went overboard on doing the fogging oil and lubricating up the cylinders. I mean, hell, it's a Honda, but that's my normal procedure on everything. Has been sitting for a while, so I just like to follow the procedure I'm used to. As far as those fuel tees that are leaking goes, it's quite possible that the tees are cracked because they're plastic. So those are not in the kit, but I think Red Eye Technical may sell the metal ones. I don't know if they do or not, but we may go online and order the metal ones. I don't ever remember doing that on a Valkyrie though, so maybe these are not prone to cracking, but it's always possible. I guess we'll just have to test them when we take them out. But yeah, she's definitely going to be fine. You know, we'll get her all prettied up once we get done and get all the brakes done. That'll probably be the third video. We'll just kind of cover some brake stuff and we'll take this thing for a shake. And that'll be done with this series. So if you want to see the next videos on the carbs, taking them out, tearing them down, doing some tear down, you need to stick around. You need to subscribe, ring the bell, and like the video and share, and you get notified when I'm going to put that stuff up. So until that time, again, you know what to do. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.